Sometimes, the greatest lessons don't come from long teachings, but from a simple story that quietly stays with us. Today, we invite you to listen to 7 Buddhist stories, short yet rich, with wisdom about happiness, responsibility, compassion, and inner strength. Each story is like a small lantern, lighting the path we walk every day. Welcome to Mindful Healing, a channel where we explore the deeper truths of life mindfulness and philosophy. Story 1. The Brave Little Bird. At the edge of a quiet village stood a small, simple house surrounded by fields and trees. One evening, without warning, a fire broke out and quickly engulfed the house in flames. The sky turned red with smoke, and villagers rushed to help, some with buckets of water, some with soaked blankets, and others stood by frozen and unsure of what to do. On the burning roof was a tiny bird's nest, and inside that nest, a small bird was trembling with fear, but in its eyes there was determination. The little bird did not fly away. Instead, it soared toward the nearby stream, filled its beak with a small drop of water, and flew back to release it onto the fire. One drop, then another, then another. Over and over again, the bird kept going, exhausted but unstoppable. Sitting on a branch nearby, a black crow watched and laughed. "You foolish little bird, what do you think you're doing? Your tiny drops will never put out that fire." Panting but calm, the bird replied, "I know I can't put out the fire on my own, but I want, when people speak of this fire, to know that I didn't just stand by and watch. I want to be remembered as one who tried, even if what I did was small." The crow fell silent. Deep down, it knew it had chosen to do nothing. You see, there will be times in life when we face our own fires, situations too big, too painful, too overwhelming. And there will be crows, people, who stand on the sidelines, mocking, doubting, or telling you your efforts are pointless. But as the Buddha taught, it is not success that defines us, but the intention behind our actions. No one expects you to save the world, but you owe it to yourself not to be the one who watches and does nothing. Like the little bird, your actions may not change everything, but they light a different kind of fire, the fire of courage, the fire of compassion, the fire that refuses to give up. What the world needs isn't more people who speak loudly, but those who act quietly and bravely, no matter how small their efforts may seem. Because sometimes, your single drop of water is enough to inspire hundreds more. Story 2. 2 Hands to Clap 1. Sunny morning, the Buddha and his disciples arrived at a quiet village to share the Dharma. As word of his arrival spread, the villagers gathered eagerly to welcome him. Among them was a woman who approached him shyly, yet with great reverence in her voice. "Venerable one, you carry yourself like a prince. Why did you choose the path of renunciation and wear such humble robes at such a young age?" The Buddha smiled gently and replied, "I left behind the palace and riches because I carried 3 questions that weighed deeply on my heart. Why do people grow old? Why do we suffer from illness? And why must death come to all? I walked away from comfort to seek the truth behind these universal sufferings." The woman was touched. She sat quietly listening to every word. When the Buddha finished speaking, she invited him to her home for a meal, a simple offering, yet sincere. However, soon after, a few villagers came to warn the Buddha, "Venerable one, please, don't visit that woman's house. She has a questionable reputation. People speak poorly of her." The Buddha remained calm. He turned to the village chief, a man respected by all, and asked, Do you believe what they say? Is this woman truly without virtue?" The chief nodded firmly. "Yes, Venerable One. I swear she is known for her disgraceful behavior." The Buddha gently took the man's hand and lifted it. "Then tell me, can you clap with just one hand?" The village chief was confused. "Of course not. You need 2 hands to clap." The Buddha nodded with a serene look. Just as one hand alone cannot produce a clap, a person cannot gain a bad reputation alone. If this woman is known for such things, it is also a reflection of the actions and desires of the men around her. If the men of this village were truly honorable and virtuous, how would this woman come to be seen in such a light? The crowd fell silent. The Buddha continued, "We are quick to judge others, to point fingers and speak of their faults. But it is much harder to look inward, to recognize our own role in the suffering of others. Judgment is like scattering husks in the wind, easy and careless. But our own faults, like hidden illness, are buried deep, and we refuse to face them." His words settled like rain after a long drought. The villagers began to reflect not just on the woman, but on themselves. For so long they had blamed her without ever questioning their own part in the story. From that day on, the village changed. They treated one another with more compassion and humility. The woman once shamed was now seen with new eyes, not as a symbol of disgrace, but as a human being worthy of dignity and respect. Story 3: The Crab and the Wave One. Peaceful morning on a quiet beach. A little crab strolled along the shore, enjoying the soft, warm sand beneath its feet. It wasn't in a hurry. It had nowhere to be. It simply loved leaving delicate little footprints behind curved, intricate patterns that danced across the sand. Every now and then it would stop and turn back to admire its work. So beautiful, it thought. These footprints show I've been here, that I left something behind. How meaningful. But just as it walked a little further, a large wave suddenly rushed in from the sea. Whoosh! The wave crashed onto the beach and swept away all of the footprints in an instant. Everything was gone just like that. The crab became furious and shouted at the wave. "Why did you do that? I thought you were my friend. You erased all the beautiful marks I made. What kind of friend are you?" The wave, calm and gentle, replied softly, "Look over there." The crab turned its gaze. Not far away, a group of fishermen stood watching the sand closely. They were following the trail of footprints to hunt for crabs. The wave continued, "I didn't erase your footprints to hurt you. I erased them to protect you. What you saw as loss was actually my way of keeping you safe." The crab fell silent. Its anger faded into quiet understanding. It looked at the now smooth sand, once filled with its proud tracks, now blank. And then it saw clearly the wave was not its enemy. It was a silent guardian. The crab lowered its claws and whispered, "Thank you." This simple story offers a powerful truth. In life, there are moments when we feel shaken, when something dear to us is suddenly taken away. We feel angry. We feel like life is unfair, that what we worked for or loved was destroyed without reason. But sometimes the things we lose are the very things that would have led us into danger. Sometimes what feels like a setback is actually a blessing in disguise. The Buddha once said, "Life isn't always black and white, right or wrong. Every situation has 2 sides, and wisdom is learning to see both." So if you find yourself facing a wave today, don't be too quick to blame. Pause, look deeper, What seems like loss may be the very thing that's keeping you whole. Story 4. Waiting for the river to dry. Once upon a time, by the banks of a gentle river sat an old beggar under a tree. His eyes followed the flowing current, lost in thought. The afternoon sun painted golden ripples on the water, and the wind gently moved the tattered fabric of his robe. Though poor in appearance, there was a quiet grace to him, like someone who had seen beyond the ordinary flow of life. A passerby, curious about the stillness of this old man, stopped and asked, "What are you doing here all alone?" The old man looked up and smiled softly. "I'm waiting for the river to dry, so I can cross to the other side." The man laughed in disbelief. "That's impossible. The river will never stop flowing. You'll be waiting forever." But the beggar just nodded calmly. "I know. I'm not really waiting for the river to dry. I'm just sitting here hoping someone will realize that we are all living the same way." The man frowned. "What do you mean?" The old man gazed at the river again and replied gently, "So many people spend their lives waiting. They say when the work is done, I'll finally rest. When my children are grown, I'll take care of myself. When I retire, I'll travel, relax, and enjoy life. But they don't realize life is like this river. It never stops flowing. There will always be one more task, one more responsibility, one more reason to wait." The man sat beside him, quietly listening. Something began to shift inside him, not guilt, but a kind of awakening. He thought of all the times he had postponed his own happiness. He remembered how often he had told himself, "Later, when things settle down." The beggar continued, "The Buddha taught us the present moment is the most precious gift we have, not because it's perfect, but because it's real. If we spend all our days chasing the right time, we'll miss the small wonders in front of us, a smile, a sunset, a shared silence." The man took a deep breath, not of regret, but of release. He looked at the river. It still flowed just like life, but this time it no longer felt like an obstacle. It felt like a reminder life doesn't wait, and neither should we. The old man said one last thing. "Life is short, my friend. If we wait for everything to be in place before we start living, we may find that when we finally look back, the river has already passed us by." Story 5. Patience and Clarity 1. Quiet afternoon. The Buddha and his disciples were walking through a peaceful forest path. After a long journey under the warm sun, they came upon a small lake nestled among the trees. The water reflected the sky like a mirror, still quiet and calm. The Buddha sat down under a tree and gently said to one of his disciples, "I'm feeling thirsty. Could you please bring me some water from the lake?" The disciple nodded and walked toward the lake with a small vessel in hand. But as he arrived, a bullock cart had just passed through, stirring up the mud beneath the surface. The once clear water was now cloudy and murky. Unsure, the disciple returned and said, "Master, the water is no longer clear. It's muddy and not fit to drink." The Buddha simply smiled and said nothing. A little while later, he softly repeated, "Please try again. Go back and fetch some water." Though puzzled, the disciple obeyed. But the water was still muddy. He returned once more, shaking his head. "Master, it's still not clear enough." The Buddha remained calm. After a while, he asked the disciple again, "Just one more time. Please try once more." This time, when the disciple approached the lake, he was surprised to find that the water had become clear again. The mud had settled to the bottom, and the surface was still and pure. He joyfully filled the bowl and brought it back. The Buddha took the water, looked at him gently, and asked, "Did you do anything to make the water clear?" "No, master. I just waited." The Buddha smiled. "Exactly. The water became clear on its own because you gave it time. You didn't stir it. You didn't try to fix it. You simply waited. And in that stillness, the mud settles." He paused, letting the words sink in, and continued, "Your mind is like that water. When it's disturbed by anger, fear, or worry, it becomes cloudy. You can't see things clearly, but you don't need to force it to calm down. You only need to be patient. Let it settle, and clarity will return." The disciple was deeply moved. He realized how often he had tried to fix his troubled mind, pushing away feelings, trying to force peace. But the more he tried, the more agitated it became. The Buddha added softly, "When you suffer loss, when pain shakes your heart, don't rush to heal. Don't force stillness. Let time do its quiet work. Stillness is not something you chase. It is something that comes when you stop chasing." The disciple bowed his head. What rose in his heart was not joy, not sorrow, but a gentle relief. A sense of trust that even when the mind feels turbulent and unclear, it will eventually settle. Story 6. The Eagle Who Believed It Was a Chicken. In the heart of a lush green forest stood an ancient Bodhi tree, its wide branches sheltering many lives. At the very top of this tree, a mother eagle had built her nest. Inside were precious eggs, carefully protected from wind and rain. At the same time, under the roots of the same tree, a wild hen found refuge and laid her own eggs. One day, strong winds swept through the forest. One of the eagle's eggs tumbled from the nest above and landed gently next to the hen's eggs. Time passed, and all the eggs hatched. Among the baby chicks was the young eagle who, having never known any different, believed it was just another chicken. It learned to peck at the ground for worms to cluck like the others, and to flap its wings, only enough to lift slightly off the ground. "This is all I can do," it thought. "I'm just a chicken." The eagle chick grew up living like this, never once questioning if there was more to who it truly was, until one evening just before sunset, the young eagle looked up and saw a magnificent bird soaring high above the trees. Its wings stretched wide as it glided through the sky with grace and strength. The young eagle gasped, "Mother, what kind of bird is that?" The hen glanced up and said, "That's an eagle king of the skies. They are strong and free. They fly higher than any other creature. Why can't I fly like that?" The hen replied firmly, "Because you're a chicken. Chickens don't fly like that. We belong on the ground. That's just how it is." And so the young eagle believed her. It never tried again. It lived its life thinking it was a chicken, and eventually died, never once touching the sky. That story stays with you, doesn't it? How many of us have lived like that eagle? Since we were young, we were told what we could or couldn't do, that we weren't good enough, smart enough, strong enough. And slowly we believed it. We stopped dreaming, stopped reaching, stopped even trying. Not because we didn't have wings, but because we forgot we ever had them. The Buddha once said, "Ignorance is the root of suffering." Not just ignorance of the world, but ignorance of who we truly are. When we don't see our own worth, our own strength, we live under the shadows of others' expectations, never fully becoming who we were meant to be. Just like the eagle born to fly, but living and dying as a chicken. But here's the beautiful truth. Awakening can happen at any moment. All it takes is a glance at the sky and the courage to ask yourself, what if I was meant to fly? Story 7, The Wise Serpent. One day, as the Buddha was teaching about compassion and the power of nonviolence, a venomous serpent slithered quietly into his presence. With sincerity in its eyes, the snake bowed and said, "Lord Buddha, I no longer wish to live in aggression. I want to give up my harmful ways. Please guide me on the path of peace." The Buddha looked at the serpent with gentle compassion, yet spoke firmly. "You say you want to live without harming others, but your heart still holds poison. You still bite. You still intimidate. If you truly wish to walk the path of awakening, you must first let go of these actions." The snake paused in silence, then responded with quiet determination. "Then from this day forward, I will no longer bite anyone. I will live with kindness and peace." The Buddha nodded, but offered a wise reminder. Not biting is good. But remember, nonviolence does not mean weakness. Compassion does not mean allowing yourself to be harmed. Understand this well. Eager to live by this vow, the snake chose to rest along the main road leading into the village where everyone could see it. As travelers passed and screamed in fear, the snake would speak gently, "Don't be afraid. I have made a vow to the Buddha. I will not harm you. I come with good intentions." At first, people were wary, but over time they began to mock the snake. Seeing it as harmless, they treated it with disrespect. One day, a greedy shopkeeper approached and said, "If you're truly kind now, then help me carry my goods. Let me use your body as a rope." Wanting to prove its gentleness, the snake agreed. The man bound the snake around his heavy bundles and dragged it across the dirt road. The snake's body bled, bruised, and was torn, but still it did not fight back. Days passed. The snake grew weak, thin, and lifeless. Villagers laughed as they passed by. No one showed kindness to the creature that had once inspired fear. Hearing of this, the Buddha went to see the serpent. He found it, lying silently in the dirt, bruised, broken, and barely breathing. Kneeling beside it, the Buddha asked softly, "My friend, you chose to live kindly. But why have you let yourself come to this?" The snake whispered, "Because I thought nonviolence meant I should never fight back. I tried so hard to be peaceful, but I forgot how to protect myself." The Buddha gently placed a hand on its battered body and said, "I told you not to bite, but I never told you to stop hissing. Nonviolence is not the same as weakness. Kindness does not mean you must allow others to walk over you. To live wisely, you must also learn to set boundaries and protect your dignity." The snake's eyes filled with understanding. The Buddha continued, "You were born a snake. You have venom not to harm others, but to defend yourself when necessary. If you deny your true nature completely, you lose balance. You are not meant to surrender your power, but to use it wisely. Don't let others believe that gentleness means foolishness. True kindness can walk hand in hand with inner strength. Compassion and clarity can live together in your heart." From that day on, the snake was no longer trampled. It still did not bite. But when someone came too close with ill intent, it hissed not to attack, but to remind others, "I know who I am, and I deserve to be treated with respect." That lesson is for all of us. To be kind does not mean to be silent. To forgive does not mean to forget your limits. To live in peace does not mean to abandon your strength. Sometimes You need to hiss not to strike, but to say, I have worth. I deserve safety. And I am not as weak as you think. 7 Stories 7 Little Lanterns in the Darkness of Life. Dear friend, we've just traveled through 7 simple stories, yet each one carried a quiet depth, a gentle wisdom, and a mirror to the soul. Without long sermons or lofty words, the image of an old man beside a flowing river, a crab angry at the wave, or a snake too kind for its own safety, allowed the light of Buddhist insight to softly enter the hidden corners of our hearts. Each story is a reflection of ourselves. Haven't we too been waiting for the river to dry, only to miss the beauty of the present moment? Haven't we clapped with one hand judging others while forgetting to look within? Haven't we tried to fix our pain rather than allowing the muddy waters of the mind to settle naturally? Haven't we blamed life for our losses, not knowing they might be waves sent to quietly protect us? Haven't we lived like eagles who thought they were chickens, believing the limits others placed on us? And in the face of the fires of life, have we stood back in silence instead of being like the brave little bird doing what we could with a single drop of courage? And have we perhaps been too kind, forgetting that nonviolence does not mean weakness, but wise strength wrapped in compassion, you see? These stories weren't just meant to be heard. They are gentle reminders that life is always moving, always challenging, and always offering us the chance to awaken, to grow, and to live more fully. At Mindful Healing, we believe you don't need to become someone else. You simply need to come home to yourself, the self that is already enough, already wise, already whole. If one of these stories touched something within you, take a moment, close your eyes, feel it, let it sink in like sunlight through leaves. And if you believe these lessons could help someone else, don't hesitate to share them. Because sometimes just one story at the right time can change an entire journey. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. We look forward to seeing you again in the next story, where the soul finds healing and the heart is lit with the lamp of understanding, compassion, and mindfulness. With gratitude and peace, Namo Shakyamuni Buddha.